ADHD seems to be an excuse for clutter, trouble reaching goals, any goals at all, missed appointments, being late for everything. So let's explore it. Now, ADHD has been a bit of a controversial diagnosis for a while. I've seen a lot of Facebook posts of people saying, don't just use ADHD as an excuse to medicate your kids or to be lazy. And honestly, I kind of wonder, a while ago, I was like, is ADHD kind of like a real diagnosis or not? If, on the other hand, you have ever forgotten your groceries in the car overnight, or you've left your laundry in the washing machine all day, or perhaps until the next morning, or maybe you find yourself really late for a lot of appointments, behind the 8 ball on kids' activities, school trips, you're struggling with your business, maybe you have ADHD. And it seems like so many people are being diagnosed with ADHD, but this is also true for other diagnoses as well. So if this is your first time here, my name is Robyn. I'm a nurse. I am an entrepreneur. I am married to a wonderful guy. I have 3 kids. 2 of them have ADHD. Actually, 3 of them do, and one of them is my husband. So why is ADHD being diagnosed more? Is ADHD even a valid excuse for not being able to get things done? And what can be done to cope with this and other issues? What about medication? So I am going to get into all of that. I've actually had some comments about ADHD and how kids need to learn. I'll get into that too. But as a mom, I didn't know my kids had ADHD until my middle one was 7. My oldest wasn't diagnosed until he was 11, but I sure knew focus was hard, and I certainly knew my husband had issues. So maybe you have ADHD. Maybe you have a head injury like me. I have actually had 2 big concussions. So I don't know if I'd say it's a head injury, but I've had a few head injuries that seem to have left some lasting issues. Or you've had trauma, which can lead to a lot of symptoms similar to ADHD as well. So I will talk mostly about ADHD in this, but there are a lot of invisible threads attaching all of these, and I just thought it was a good time to sit down and have a chat. So no, I don't think ADHD is an excuse, but I think it is a reason. So we're going to get into it. So grab your tea and let's go. So not too long ago, I did a video talking about getting my kids on Dawn from the Minimal Mom's laundry system. And I was taking the laundry back from my kids because I did not want them to have to deal with it right now. Now, I got a lot of people in the comments who were like, that's great. Other people who were like, I have kids with ADHD and they do their laundry. And I had other people who were like, your kids need to learn how to do it. Here's the thing. My kids know how to do laundry. The problem is they are juggling a lot of things. In particular, the older 2 are trying to navigate high school, a whole whack of other things. They still have other chores in the house. It's just that the laundry was bothering me a lot. I had a wonderful person who was like, they'll figure out a way when they have to. And I was like, exactly. Because the thing with people with ADHD is they often need accommodations. They need extra support. So in schools, you will hear people talking about accommodations for many things. A couple of them also have different learning disabilities that require accommodations. As their mom, I'm going to accommodate them and myself by getting this laundry done so I don't have to look at it. And other people have said, hey, they can just wear dirty clothes. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. Except for I don't really want that. I'm supporting them. I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this for you. As the time gets closer for the oldest to move out, I mean, his plan is to go to university in like a year and a half. We will definitely be working really hard, but he's got a lot of stuff to figure out. So if I can help him out with something, I'm going to right now. People with ADHD have real struggles finishing the things that they start. And often they're really, really good at starting things. I mean, it's always fun to start a new task. Last year, my husband bought a Volkswagen Bug and he was like, I am going to redo this. He struggles like a lot of men seem to, and maybe a lot of women with ADHD, finding an actual hobby that he can do. He needs something to distract him, but he finds really drawn to screens a lot of the time. And he was like, he loves Volkswagen Bugs, but he wanted to redo one, like just sort of take one that's all beaten down and get it going. And so he started working on it, and then it's like the luster started wearing off. I'm going to get into why that is in a minute, and that there are things that you can do to overcome it. So this is a abandoned project at the moment. Now my middle son, who also has ADHD, they are working on it together, and hopefully they can keep each other motivated and going. Now, ADHD and probably most neurodivergencies can make things in life harder. And unfortunately, that is true. ADHD and a lot of neurodivergencies can make jobs harder. It can make holding your job harder. It can make school harder. It can make focusing anywhere harder, relationships harder, parenting harder. It can leave people feeling ashamed. They can doubt themselves, not reach their best selves in life. A lot of entrepreneurs struggle with their ADHD and how to actually get so much done and reach their potential. But believe me, there are some real tricks to it. So ADHD is a real medical diagnosis. The prefrontal cortex right behind your forehead, right here in your brain, where they used to do lobotomies. This is the area responsible in your brain for logic and for impulsivity control. And it's the part of your brain that says, maybe I shouldn't jump off of this cliff into the small little puddle. Or if I start doing this fun task right now, I am going to be late for this appointment or this not fun task. Babies have a really underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, and it honestly doesn't fully develop until people are 25, which is why teenagers seem to be such risk takers. But people with ADHD, their prefrontal cortex doesn't quite work at the same level as the rest of the brain. I'll get into that, a little bit more of that in just a second. But there's also chemicals that are just not playing quite so nicely either. So I thought it was really interesting that people with ADHD have more trouble accessing two of the most important neurotransmitters, and that is dopamine. Dopamine is the reward center of your brain. Dopamine is your best friend. When you get a job done, dopamine is the little buddy behind you being like, yeah, you did it. And norepinephrine helps quiet all of the chaos around us so we can focus. So you're having more trouble accessing the dopamine and the norepinephrine. That is why when you are working, maybe you're self-employed, you're an entrepreneur, or you're even just doing things around the house, the mundane things can be really, really hard because you just don't quite get that dopamine hit that a lot of people do. There are some tricks though. The other thing, distractibility and focus are so hard as well because the norepinephrine is not there, or it's harder to access. And I thought that was so interesting. And in my own family, I can see that so much. And that is why it's so important for people with ADHD and a lot of these neurodivergencies to actually get into the zone. And this is true for a lot of people. It's just that a lot of people with focus issues have trouble getting into that. ADHD has some super, super awesome traits, but the worst part of ADHD and so many neurodivergencies is just how people beat themselves up and they don't realize how amazing it can be. And no, it is not a superpower. A lot of people will be like, ADHD is your superpower. It's actually a brain disorder, but some of the features from it can be harnessed for greatness. And when my two kids were diagnosed with ADHD and my husband, I mean, it's not a happy thing really, but they kind of had to mourn it a bit, but then they recognized there are some really good benefits. So, I mean, there are a lot of millionaires, very successful entrepreneurs, a lot of really creative people. Jim Carrey has ADHD. I mean, imagine him without it. And he actually, I've seen, like, he's retired from acting now, I think, but I saw him on a show with Jerry Seinfeld, and Jerry Seinfeld and him drove around and he brought Jerry back to his studio. He paints these incredible paintings. A lot of people with ADHD can be so creative, but also they can be really amazing at managing multiple things at the same time when they get really good at it. They actually also aren't as bothered by external noise as others, which I would really love, because I think that my multiple concussions have made it so I can really not tolerate a lot of extra noise around me.
What are you doing?
My middle son, I mean, when he was a toddler, he could hardly cope with life. However, when he actually finally was diagnosed with ADHD and he did start taking medication, I will get into medication in a minute, he was actually able to finally focus, but in a really incredible way. He would spend hours building Lego. It was incredible. He made like a safe. He made a gun that would shoot like a little piece of Lego. He made such cool things. And there are just some really other cool things about ADHD. People with ADHD can have really good social intelligence or humor. They can be super empathetic, and they're really good at connecting with people. The people with ADHD in my family are so witty. It is absolutely incredible. But you have to find what works for you. And one of my awesome, amazing community members has autism and ADHD, and she has some trauma. But she has created some amazing systems to get things done, which I think is just so cool. Now, for me, if we're talking about focus, because I do have focus problems, I haven't been diagnosed with ADHD. Maybe I haven't. I don't know. It's really hard to be diagnosed at the province I live in Canada as an adult. But I use the Pomodoro method, which is where you spend 25 minutes focused on something with a 5-minute break. And I do that a lot. That helps me. But there are so many other systems that will work. And in my house, I've developed a lot for myself so I can keep on top of my housework, so I can run my business, so I can keep myself happy and grounded, so I can be productive. But what about medication? Now, medication is not a bad thing. Medication is an incredible treatment for ADHD. Now, remember the frontal lobe that I was talking about, the prefrontal cortex. Now, years ago, when my middle son, when they first suspected he had ADHD, I remember they said he was in grade 2, and the lady said, we need to have a meeting with the teacher. And I was like, oh yeah, here we go. Because he was the type of kid where every year when he would start school, I would write a letter all about him to the teacher and be like, he's wonderful. However, this will help, because he really had trouble managing his focus and his emotions. And so they said, we think he has ADHD. And I was like, are you serious? And they were like, oh yeah, like he can't focus on anything. And I was like, well, if anybody has ADHD, it's my oldest. And I mean, so he was diagnosed a couple of years later. But anyway, they were like, you need to get him medicated. And right away, I was just like, no way. I am not medicating my child. I don't want to even entertain the idea. I don't like how sort of like I go in for a parent-teacher conference and I'm being told to medicate my child. However, it took some time for me to process, like I said, that my son had ADHD. Talked to the pediatrician. She said, you can try putting in these different strategies and see how they help. And I think she honestly was like, this is a mother that needs to accept the fact that her kid has ADHD and probably he should try some medication. So I was taking a course, I'm a nurse, and they were actually talking about ADHD and how the prefrontal cortex is working like at this level for a person without ADHD, but it's working at this level for a person with ADHD. Now, the medications for ADHD, most of them are stimulants, and the most effective from my experience, and I am not giving it medical advice, I'm just explaining my experience, the medications will bring the prefrontal cortex up to around the same level as somebody who doesn't have ADHD because it's a stimulant. It brings it up. If you gave that person who didn't have ADHD the stimulant, they'd be like, wow, right? So we gave our middle son ADHD over a December. We titrated it up. We slowly brought it up. And it was a really emotional month. He was already an emotional kid. Thank goodness it was December. But once we got him to the right dose, it was incredible. It was like getting to know my son. He was able to stop. He was able to be so creative. He was not like that before. He is the most creative person I think I've ever met in my life. He is so funny. He is so witty. I want to implore you not to feel judged when people talk about medication, especially people who don't understand. And I'm not saying use medication. What I am saying is that You need to do your research, talk to your doctors, and understand that a lot of people may have some opinions, but they don't really know what they're talking about in a lot of cases. It's also really helpful to find a community that understands as well. And so for yourself, if you have ADHD or you think you do your best if it's really impacting you to get diagnosed. And if you feel like medication works, a lot of adults still take medication. They often take a much smaller dose than a child will because their metabolisms are completely different. The thing about ADHD I want you to remember, and a lot of neurodivergencies really, is that you can't let them stand in your way. They may slow you down a little. You may have to find a different way to do things. It is incredible to me how humans can cope. A lot of people with ADHD, my gosh, these people have literally been trying to figure out ways to cope from the very beginning. And if I think about my middle son in particular, this poor child honestly must have just been so overstimulated by the environment from the beginning because he was a very challenging toddler and preschooler, let me tell you. If you're an entrepreneur or a homemaker, you can still make changes that can have a huge impact on your focus, your creativity, your productivity, your life. I want to hear about your struggles with ADHD, neurodivergencies. Tell me if you think it's an excuse. I want to hear it all. How do you cope? How don't you? And this is a video all about how clutter affects those with ADHD and other neurodivergencies. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.